Today on Larry King Now, acclaimed TV showrunner Dan Harmon. Was Community almost everything? Was it a smorgasbord? Good, bad, good for you, bad for you?
Oh yeah, but definitely a net positive. You won't hear me complaining about having that experience at all. If I pull out a typewriter right now and write a Community movie just from my own heart and mind, then I have to go through the heartbreak and agony of finding out which of the people are going to show up to make it, you know. And whereas on the other hand, if I wait for everybody to line up and say we're all out of work and ready to do a Community movie, well, I guess that's a bad idea too.
Do you agree with the Hollywood Reporter? Are you the industry's most controversial showrunner?
No.
Good answer.
Therefore, yes.
You care about what people think of you.
Oh, God, yes. I don't even know what I am outside of what people think of me.
Plus, what's your take on this year's election?
Seems historical.
There's never been anything like it.
I guess people were madder than we thought about there being a black president, and so it's, for better or for worse, truly, truly interesting to watch.
All next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. My special guest is Dan Harmon, the Emmy Award-winning creator of Community. He also co-created the animated series Rick and Morty, currently airing on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim. He hosts the hit podcast as Harmontown, as well as hosting and producing Great Minds with Dan Harmon on the History Channel. His latest project is Harmonquest. That premieres July 14th on CISO, NBC's new video-on-demand service. What is CISO?
Oh, boy, I don't know yet. I certainly didn't know it was NBC, or I wouldn't have signed up. I was told that much later. No, it's there's the new thing with the
streaming.
The old studios is they're launching these SVODs. They're like baby Netflixes. So it's only a couple bucks a month. CISO is a particularly good one. I'm not just saying that because they're my boss on this project, but it's for comedy nerds. It's for comedy snobs, really. They have a library of all of the most iconic comedy stuff. If you are an actual aficionado of comedy, this is the stuff that you need to have seen. So if you're 25, maybe you haven't seen, Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, for instance.
Well, if I'm an aficionado of comedy, but I love Mel Brooks and Don Rickles,
you're out of luck.
I'm out of luck.
Yeah,
Okay.
Too expensive.
Tell me
those
about
libraries.
Tell me.
I don't know where you go for that.
2,000-year-old man would be hard to get. Tell me about Harmonquest.
Harmonquest is the realization of about a decade-long fantasy I had ever since I saw the Ricky Gervais podcast show on HBO. Did you ever see that?
No.
Ricky Gervais had this podcast that he did with Stephen Merchant and Carl Pilkington, their friend. And then they took the audio from some of those episodes and they did a show on HBO where they animated to the audio. So the audio is very impromptu because they're just talking to Carl. And Carl's quite a character and has these flights of fancy and these explanations of things. And the animators just go nuts with this stuff. And I would howl with laughter when I watched that show, and I realized this is something that I find particularly funny, is the relationship between good animation and impromptu previously recorded audio. That I combined with my love of fantasy role-playing games, which has existed since childhood. And so I thought, if we could get in front of an audience, celebrity guests, play these games like I did when I was 15 years old, and then we take the audio, we give it to animators. So the animators are showing us with our swords and our shields and are going through dungeons and things.
Is it like Dungeons and Dragons? I mean, is it based on your love for Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, that's the original fantasy role-playing game that started it all.
When you're working for CISO, do you have to run into NBC executives?
No. I don't think Bob Greenblatt cares what's going on at CISO. I don't know. Maybe if CISO's very successful, it'll start like archiving American Idol or something. Or,
You used
they have the voice.
You used animation on Community. You co-created the series Rick and Morty. Writing for animation, is it still writing? And is writing?
Very much so. In my case, in animation, a good chunk of the animation that we love is what's called board driven, which means that the artists are sort of leading the dance with their very Tex Avery derived John Kricfalusi kind of he did Ren and Stimpy, like that animator's instinct for, I'm going to choreograph something visually that's going to make you laugh. That's a huge part of animation. And when something's board driven, it means the artists are driving it and the writers are sort of playing catch up.
Is that true of Family Guy?
No, I doubt it. I mean,
writing drive.
Those shows are more like there's no difference between them from the writer's room perspective because it's story driven, it's script driven. So Rick and Morty is like that as well. Therefore, from my perspective, it's really no different at all. There's minor differences in terms of what you're able to fix at what point in the pipeline. In live action, you're doing 1,000 takes with gifted actors from various camera angles, and then you get to sit in the edit bay and say, you know, how many times did they do this line? Did they ever do it differently? Did the director ever move the camera differently? In animation, you have to write the script, then you record it with the actors before a single thing is drawn.
In animation, you can get away with things more, like Family Guy or other examples. You can be almost more crude.
Yes.
For example, Ted, the movie First Ted. As a teddy bear, he could get away with anything.
Yeah, I think animation, stop motion animation, we did a movie with my studio, Starburns Industries. Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson directed it, called Anomalisa. It's a very, very dark movie about really the futility of monogamy is how I look at it, but and takes place almost entirely in a hotel room. But it's stop motion animation, and it uses these incredibly photorealistic puppets, but they are still puppets. And I think what we find is that the resistance by the audience is lowered by anything that's not flesh and blood. It lets you trust things a little bit more.
I appeared in 3 Shreks, and 3 Shreks, 2, 3, and 4. And
that's the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life, is that phrase. I appeared in 3 Shreks. I've got a like shrapnel wound.
And when I did it, they told me that they drew it after I recorded it. Mm-hmm. Is that the usual?
Yes. Yeah, the writers write the script. You go in, you read all your Shrek lines. What were you, a cookie?
No, I was the ugly stepsister.
Okay.
I was a woman.
Yeah, so and then they hand that to artists, and the artists draw stuff.
That's true of all.
Yeah. I mean, and then depending on the relationship, we probably would like you to come back in at a certain point and do ADR because we've figured out that we're not doing it right, you know. I don't know. I'm sure Shrek 3 was a tight ship, but where I come from, there's usually some cleanup to be done along the way.
Is a Community movie in the works? That's coming up. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Dan Harmon. We're back with Dan Harmon. His newest is Harmonquest. It premieres July 14th on CISO, NBC's new video-on-demand service. He's a very busy guy, got a lot of things in the works. Community was turbulent, is that a good word?
Yeah, that sounds good.
You were forced out as the showrunner by NBC. You had problems with some of the people who worked on it, one in particular, Chevy Chase, right? And it had a great fan base, right?
Absolutely.
Was Community almost everything? Was it a smorgasbord? Good, bad, good for you, bad for you?
Oh, yeah, but definitely a net positive. You won't hear me complaining about having that experience at all. A lot of regrets about, for instance, what you mentioned, like my public kind of silliness with Chevy. That was, me being unprofessional and combined with like pretty bad luck about who was recording what and leaking what to the internet when I did something that was sort of I played voicemails that I was getting from him in the midst of a little fight I was having with him. It was my attempt to therapeutically, like, turn something that was kind of eating away at me into laughter for 100 people.
Now you say it's wrong.
Yeah, of course. I've since realized that I grew up on the internet, and for most of my life, the internet was a place to hide from the world, and it was a place where nerds were empowered because there was more secrecy to it, and in your wildest dreams, you would ever say something that would all of a sudden get the country's attention. So when I was 25, I would blog and I would name names because it was a different culture, and it was that Chevy experience that finally made me realize, my right to swing my fist ends at the other people's noses. I can't involve other people in my compulsion for transparency.
Was Chevy difficult to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wish he was sitting here so that didn't seem scandalous to say, because I doubt he would disagree. I mean, I think that's one of his charms too, is that when he walks into the room, the temperature changes. I mean, he's unignorable. He refuses to be ignored, which is really kind of it's wonderful about him, and that was the great thing about that character, was it was based on something real from the core of his being that I always found very, very charming, which was that kind of Daffy Duck, do not go gentle, screw you for trying to ignore me, individualism.
Do they blame that series for the demise of Yahoo Screen?
If you look at the numbers, it sure seems like we were a big part of that project not going, because the money that changed hands between Yahoo and Sony, it was pretty. I saw those articles that kind of recapped what the deals, and it was like, wow, I wouldn't have recommended you guys do this show.
You made Joel McHale a star.
Thank you.
And Gillian was here recently, Gillian Jacobs, and she said she'd love to do a community movie. What about it?
It's difficult, because if I pull out a typewriter right now and write a community movie just from my own heart and mind, then I have to go through the heartbreak and agony of finding out which of the people are going to show up to make it, And whereas on the other hand, if I wait for everybody to line up and say, we're all out of work and ready to do a community movie, well, I guess that's a bad idea too.
Why did Community work?
It's sincerity. I mean, I was as obsessed with that show as any viewer could have been. So I think that previous to the golden age of television, what we're calling now, the typical unfortunate relationship was that because there was so much money in TV and the audiences were so large and the stakes were so high, there was almost an encouragement for there to be a disconnect between the people producing the shows and the people watching them. If you were good at making TV, if you were experienced, it was because you weren't really a viewer of it. It was the part of you that looked at it as, it's just a job. So in a strange, ironic way, the fact that I didn't come up through the trenches, for instance, as a staff writer, I simply kept writing pilots until one got turned into a show. That emotional immaturity, that sensitivity to the medium of television is what got me in a lot of trouble, and also I think what made the show okay.
How many years was it on?
A total of 6.
Where could I see it now?
You could see the first 5 seasons at Hulu. I know that much.
So it would or wouldn't be a movie?
I mean, it'll make a great movie. It'll happen.
It will?
It'll certainly happen.
So your memories are more fond than sad?
Oh, of course, yeah. No, like I said, the only negative memories I have of the community experience are regrets about my lack of experience. It's the same as you feel about maybe high school. You kind of just wish you could go back and do it again, knowing what you know now. But you don't really, I mean, I guess it's a terrible example. We all hated high school.
No, I hated it. Is that true? Why do we look at it fondly?
Well, because your bones were made of rubber, and you were immune to all diseases, and everything was the end of the world and the beginning of life. Now we're just worn down pieces of sandstone.
The Hollywood Reporter calls him industry's most controversial showrunner. But does Dan agree with that? That's next. Don't go away. We're back with Dan Harmon, Harmonquest, combining animation and real live with a studio audience. It's smorgasbord. It's everything in the pot. It premieres July 14th on CISO. Jerry Seinfeld says that political correctness will destroy comedy. You agree?
No. I think that I think that what destroys comedy always is lack of sincerity. I think people trying too hard to do anything other than make themselves laugh. I think that we have classically tolerated things that push our boundaries and push our buttons. And when we let people get away with it, it's particularly because there's a sense that that artist is being sincere. And I think that the trouble is when an unfunny comic who's trying to be funny by being controversial does a joke about a topic that raises eyebrows. That's when we really get fallout. It's not when someone's being hilarious. The fact is 85% of all anything is bad, including comedy. So 85% of comics are out there doing bad jokes. And so, yeah, the political correctness maybe is good to like go into that ditch and go, look, if you're gonna run the poop through the sewer here next to Rome, like we need some health regulations. You can't just like spray it.
Do you agree with the Hollywood Reporter? Are you the industry's most controversial showrunner?
No!
Good answer.
Therefore, yes.
Do you care about what people think of you?
Oh, God, yes. I don't even know what I am outside of what people think of me.
You like being outspoken.
I have no choice. I have no choice.
Are you maturing?
Yeah, but not through any merit. That's just time.
Were you class clown?
Kinda, yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
Milwaukee.
It's good to be the class clown in Milwaukee. Do you live in fear of Chicago?
I do. I really do. I always, to this day, even though I've been to New York several times, I still think of Chicago as the big city. It's scary there.
It's hard being a second city.
Yeah.
Well,
imagine being a third one, 90 minutes north.
We play a little game of If You Only Knew. I'll just throw some things at you. What makes you laugh all the time?
Farts. I mean...
Why are farts funny?
Because no matter how highly we evolve, we still have a sphincter at the bottom of our body, and it makes a funny sound when air
Remember that
out?
guy used to go on the Tonight Show and had a little thing that made fart. He had a little button.
Mr. Farts.
Mr. Fart, and people would...
I made that up.
He was making this little machine. He hid it under him.
Boy, to be in showbiz back then. It was easier to be a rapper too. You could just talk about peas and carrots and.
What's your favorite TV show, other than any of yours?
I mean, it's a boring answer, but Game of Thrones is the thing I've been watching.
I haven't seen it. What is the fascination of Game of Thrones?
For me, it's that when I was growing up, people dressed like that, talking about those things, were something that I had to do in my bedroom with my nerd friends, while the things on TV were about oil tycoons. It's a primetime soap opera, but it's about Dungeons and Dragons. That's the appeal to me. It's
there's a show about it. They have a discussion show.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It's also, and I think it's fun. I mean, I think George R.R. Martin, he created a universe that kind of like The Sopranos and like other good HBO shows, like Deadwood, for instance. There's an element to Game of Thrones where you are conditioned to understand that, as in real life, you don't know who's going to die next. You don't know what's going to happen. Just when you think that somebody's deserves a break, they die. Just when you think someone is a villain, they turn out to do something likable. And I think that's part of the addiction.
What do people get wrong about Hollywood?
I think they don't understand that it's not a public utility. I mean, from my interactions on the internet and things, I think they think that we're elected officials, and that we can lose our jobs if they hashtag enough. And I want them to understand. No, this is like fishing or welding or anything else, where if you're interested in it, you need to get into it and come out here and help.
What do most people get wrong about you?
I think that I don't like them. I think people think that I don't like them.
What makes a good showrunner?
Humility, honestly, because with that comes the ability to delegate and collaborate.
What's something no one knows about you?
I rub a mannequin leg on my nipple when I masturbate, but everyone actually knows that.
By the way, a lot of people do that.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Coming up, we'll get Dan's take on this year's elections, and he'll take some social media questions right after the break. We're back with Dan Harmon. Tell me about the Great Mind Show. It's a spoof of talk shows, right?
It's a historical goof off. It's the conceit is that I have a time machine. It brings historical figures in the form of sort of clones into the present. They have about 6 hours to run around the modern world. I talk to them, and then they disintegrate.
You do all the writing?
No, God, no. I don't do any of it. I mean, I throw the script in the garbage when I get to the set, but the poor suffering writers are Andrew Weinberg and Steve O'Donnell.
You're a history buff, right?
I wouldn't say that, no. Because if you say that and then you get something wrong.
I ask you about Rutherford B. Hayes, and you don't know what I'm talking
exactly,
about.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. And by the way, I will not know.
What's your take on this year's election?
Seems historical.
There's never been anything like it.
Yeah. It's been fascinating. I guess people were madder than we thought about there being a black president, and so a fascinating turn of events happened on the Republican side of things. It's for better or for worse, truly interesting to watch. I mean,
what do you think a Clinton presidency would be like? Hillary, Bill will be around.
I think it'll be comfortable. I think that's the appeal, right? It's the known, and I think the odd thing is that we didn't even realize maybe 2 years ago how covetous comfort was going to be.
Is that what favors her, do you think?
Well, she's the known quantity. She's the politician that's running in a two-man race between her and an orange monster.
So we usually vote for what we know?
I think that America likes to use its semi-right to free speech to express a lot of fascinating things about what they're going through. But if you look at our behavior, I think we're a right-of-center empire that is very comfortable the way we are. I do think that we're going to tend to vote for what happened yesterday because we like it just fine.
We have some social media questions for you. Lost at Home on Twitter wants to know, how does the new trigger warning on culture affect your edgy writing? Is it considered?
It's a window to a different form of being funny. I mean, as a personality and as a person that's infusing life into characters now, that's part of life is the consciousness of saying things the wrong way, the desire not to say things the wrong way. The desire to not hurt people, no matter what you do, and how much more complicated that's gotten in the modern world. It's just a new thing to explore. I was never really a shock comedy guy anyway.
Colin from the Larry King Now blog, what platform do you find most comfortable to write in?
I guess the easiest is animation, as with Rick and Morty. Simple.
Clipped Wisdom on Twitter. Do you think you'll ever be able to do an episode where Rick and Morty run into Doc and Marty from Back to the Future?
My lawyer would strongly advise against that, I think. I don't know who those other two characters are. I don't know. We'll see what the future holds.
Luke Drummond on Twitter wants to know, has there been a significant event or person who's influenced you as a writer and creator?
Kurt Vonnegut was my single biggest influence. Did you knew him?
Interviewed him 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he was the most important influence on me.
At Damaged Writing on the Larry King Now blog, when writing, if you're stuck, do you work on something else as a creative change your pace or power through it?
I mean, if you have the luxury of a deadline, you power through it. Or in my case, you masturbate until you get yelled at the 3rd time, and then you power through it. There's an addiction there to adrenaline, which is an unhealthy workflow. My advice to stuck writers who are on their own is to get unstuck by proving how bad you are. Stop trying to prove that you're a good writer to yourself. That's what's probably got you stuck.
Writing is bleeding, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we'd love to call it that.
It's a lonely profession.
Macho.
It's a lonely profession.
Yeah, it's bad. It's lonely. I have a girlfriend who's a writer who's younger than me and who's going through that, going from writing on a show and collaborating to trying to write her own sample spec pilot, and it's like watching a younger writer go through that it's bleeding. Yeah. At
Mac L. Cabrera from the Larry King Now blog, how long did it take for you to be 100% satisfied with a script?
That never happens.
Sam Michael from the Larry King Now blog, was there a moment you knew this is what you wanted to do? And what was it?
I remember being in first grade. There was a bulletin board that said the fruits of labor. The teachers had made this cornucopia with construction paper, and it said, what will you be? And the orange said astronaut, and the watermelon said princess or veterinarian or something, and the banana said author. And that's the first time I realized there was a word for this thing that I loved doing, which was, even before first grade, even before kindergarten, I was
composing.
Yeah, I was writing little stories and things, giving them to my mom and trying to get praise from her. It seems like before I could speak, I was doing that.
Great pleasure meeting you, man.
All right.
Big thanks to my guest, Dan Harmon. Be sure to catch Dan's new show, Harmonquest, only on CISO, this July 14th. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at King's Things, and I'll see you next time.